So here we are, another day, another adventure. Today we're off to Clava Cairns, just outside Culloden. It's an early Bronze Age burial site, about 4,000 years old. It's a little different to the kind of burial sites that I'm used to. Being an Orcadian, we're kind of more used to hilltop sites. This is a little bit more enclosed by the landscape. It was made famous in Outlander, and it's become very popular since then. It used to be a nice quiet place I could come to and just mooch about on my own. But I thought we'd come here, we'd take some pictures and show you what the place is all about. So we're going to play with the lower for this one. I'm going to do a 3-shot panorama with the tilt shift. So look at this. Take one picture here, one picture here, and one picture here. And then we can stitch all those in Lightroom to create a really cool panoramic image of this particular cairn. So I thought I'd quickly show you how I create my panoramic images. These were shot with the Leica 15mm tilt shift that I use a lot for this kind of work. It's slightly easier than doing it handheld because it lines up the pictures almost exactly, but the principle is basically the same however I do it. So I select the images that I've created, in this case numbers 1, 2 and 3, and then it's photo merge panorama, or Control M in Lightroom Classic, which is what I tend to use to create this. That gives me my basic image. The boundary wrap won't make much difference on this because they're so closely aligned, but that moves the top and the bottom of the frame, and sometimes introduces a wee bit of curvature as well. It doesn't correct the distortion quite so much, but if you've got things which are being cropped too close, I will use the boundary wrap to bring the full image in. I'll go with cylindrical because that's the closest approximation to what I've done, and then merge. So now you can start to edit that. So we go into the develop module, and then as I showed last time, I start with the sky. I don't know why I always start with the sky. It's just habit, I suppose. So I usually reduce the highlights a little bit, give it a bit of contrast, and then rather than reducing the shadows, I tend to darken them a little bit because I like a little bit of drama in my images. I sometimes adjust the colour temperature and I sometimes adjust the saturation, but for the minute I'm not going to bother because this looks okay as is. So clarity is great. Clarity and dehaze, they just work to bring the sky out. They also unfortunately work to bring out the filthy centre, which I have still got. So that's starting to look okay. I think I might just give it a tiny touch of saturation. And I might give it a little bit of warmth as well, because I just want a bit of warmth in those clouds. I want it to be an early spring type vibe to this picture. So now I duplicate and invert to bring in the foreground and the main subject. So on here I will increase this exposure a touch. What I'm trying to do is just get some clear definition to this overall image. Drop the highlights. I've just seen there's a little group of people over here, but we'll get rid of them in Photoshop later. I said I don't really like using Photoshop to remove things from the landscape, but I do accept people and cars. Right, so we've just lifted the shadows a little bit because I want a little bit more definition in the trees over here. I'm going to give it some warmth, a little saturation. It's all very subtle. Don't go for big changes. Just gently edge things up. and don't push it to the point that it starts looking a little bit weird. Right, so that's not bad. That's where I'm going to. So we've gone from that to that. So we've already got a bit of pop coming into there. It's starting to be a little bit more vibrant. This whole process is much quicker if I'm not explaining it and thinking about what I'm doing at the same time. A lot of this is just pure muscle memory. So here's the image as we've got to so far. So I'm quite happy with that in general. I might crop some of this bottom off it, because I'm not sure this is doing me anything particular down here. It's not really adding anything to the scene, and I think, I think I might crop in the side here as well, actually, and just lose those people. I do kind of like those trees, but let's see if we bring it in just to the stones at the base there. I think that's going to be a bit wide. I think we'll just bring it right into the monument itself. I do kind of like the balance of those trees, but I think that's going to make a more interesting image. And it's quite big enough. It's a 48 megapixel camera. It's 3 frames at 48 megapixels. This will still print plenty big. So the magic erasery thing, remove tool, comes into play to sort out the filth. I'll probably need to do a little bit more of this after my next stage, because some of the filters I use do have a habit of bringing them out. There's a little bit of sun flare here too, but it'll do a good job on getting rid of that for me. Just a little bit there. There we go, that's got rid of it. Don't be afraid of going over things a couple of times if you need to. That car, that's offending me. It's going. Fortunately, it's just in amongst the brush, so you don't really notice the fact that it's not quite as it should be. So that's quite nice. I'm quite pleased with that now. That's looking good. Right, so we'll zoom out. So this is where we're up to now. So we'll bring in color effects. This is a fantastic piece of software by Nick Collection, DxO, should I say. It gives you a whole load of filters that you can use to modify your image. So let's bring this up nice and big so you can see what we're doing. And what we'll do, rather than using one of my presets, I will kind of go through the process. It's a bit slower because I've got to think about what I'm trying to do. So the first thing I like to do, detail extractor. I tend to use that first because sometimes I like to tame it with other filters further on. I almost always go fine, and I almost always go for in the teens. So I'm happy with how that's looking on the detail extractor. It looks a little bit washed out at the minute, but don't worry about that just yet. So the next thing I like to do is go down to Pro Contrast. If you click on the plus, it adds it on as an extra layer rather than replacing what you've already done. So just bear that in mind. So what I tend to use with this is I use correct contrast and I use dynamic contrast, and that just adds a bit of the life back to the picture again. And you can use the little tick sign just to see what you've done and to see what each effect has. So the detail extractor's pulled out a wee bit more in the clouds, which is what I was looking for from it, and it's just picked out a little bit of extra micro contrast really on the foreground. So again, I'm using fairly conservative levels of change on these filters. I don't like going too much. So my next thing I like to do is I like to just tackle a little bit on the sky. So I'm looking now for a graduated neutral density filter. So we'll plus that one on. And this lets me just tweak the balance a little bit. So I can reduce the sky and just bring the clouds, get a little bit more drama in them. But I can also increase the lower tonality, so I can just get a little bit more brightness in here. I can alter the blend. And I can alter the vertical shift, so I can move where that filter is taking effect. So again, subtle, very subtle. But it's just another layer of enhancement. Another one I quite enjoy using is a reflector effect, which is really more of a portrait filter. But I find it's quite good for this kind of thing too. But not that much. So I bring the light intensity right down, very low. And then I just play around with the fall off and the positioning a little bit just to get it where I want it. Source direction can just alter things a wee bit as well. But what I'm looking for is just a very subtle, very, very subtle increase in warmth. I want it mainly on the bottom of the image, not the top. So there we go. So a little bit less than that. Very subtle. There we go. So that's just added a wee bit of warmth into this lower portion down here. Sunlight. So again, you just drop this down just to give it a slight glow. You can change the temperature so it's not quite so warm. You can drop the brightness down a wee bit and play with the contrast and saturation and things. It's got a bit more drama on that one. Sorry, just trying to check how it's reacting. So that's quite nice, that's quite good. I'm just going to increase the lower tonality a little bit more. Don't be afraid to go back up and just tweak other settings a little bit to get it where you want it as you're going along. All these interact with each other, so it is kind of a bit of a juggling act to get it how you finally want it. Now the last thing I'm going to add in is a lens vignette, because it's me and I like them. So shape, I like something that goes top and bottom as well, so I go for a fairly square look. So bring this right up. Amount, yep, you've guessed it, it's going to go very, very mild. Probably somewhere around that. It's just to create a subtle frame and to try and keep the eyes of the viewer in the main frame area. So that's not bad. It's just a little bit too warm at the minute. That's a bit better. I've dropped that right down now to 7. The sunlight's at 7. The light temperature maybe could go a little bit warmer. So that's starting to look a little bit more otherworldly now, which is what we're aiming at. Kind of a bit of a fairy tale vibe to it is what I'm looking for. So I'm quite pleased with that. That's not bad. So we'll go back to before and after. It's a fairly subtle change, but there we go. So that's got a bit of warmth. It's starting to look a little bit more appealing. It's starting to look a little bit more story-like, and it's starting to make you imagine a little bit more about what is you're looking at, what the story is to this place, basically. So then I've just got to do a final tidy up, check I've got all the little blobs out the sky, because some more will have been brought up, and then I'm going to do a quick denoise, just because we've introduced a little bit too much grain into that sky by messing with it. Some of these footprints are a little distracting, so I don't want them in. So the problem with the popular site is that people do tend to leave their footprints everywhere, even if I don't want them. It's very rude. It's like they know that I'm going to take a picture here and they want to walk right through my frame. I'm only joking. I'm not really that offended by footprints. But it's just detracting slightly from the storied vibe that I'm trying for in this. So that's basically there, and then we'll go over. I'll just flatten it. Flatten image. Knock on define. There we go. I'll just take the automatic. I don't want it to do too much. I just want a fairly subtle denoise. That looks a lot nicer. I'm happy with that. Final chest of curves. Sometimes I might just lift the brightness a wee bit here. Just give it a bit more pop. And I'll give it a little bit more saturation. Recently I've been doing 20 because someone told me they thought that was an appropriate value, rather than my gut reaction's always been about 10. But we're going to try 15 and we'll cut the difference. There we go. Okay, and that's it. The final image. Clava Cairns from today. Drop it to 8-bit. That's flattened as well because I've got that all on a shortcut. Job done. Just a case of keywording it and saving it. So with this cane we've got some pretty cool shadows going into the frame. There's also this raised portion of the old structure that points out towards me, towards this upright. I would say it's a standing stone, but I think it's probably more like a curbstone. Anyway, here's what we've got. I'm going to shoot this on a wide angle again. I'm not going to bother doing panoramic on this occasion. I think just a single shot, but I'm going to have to get down low to get my shadow out of the frame here. So this is where we're looking at. That's pretty nice. I like that. Right, see what other compositions I can find here. The trees are quite cool too. I might try and incorporate some of these into the imagery. Try and find natural framing if you can. That's always quite a good way of making a composition a lot more interesting. Using a wide angle means I can get pretty close up to it. Let's have a look at this. So there we go. Camera set up between the trees. I'm catching the sides of the trees to enclose the frame in a wee bit. I can probably go closer actually. And lower might be quite nice. Let's try that. So that's a pretty cool view from low down here. There's some interesting stones around here too. This cleft stone here is quite exciting. I can't remember if there's any carvings or any cup and ring marks on these. Sorry, going back to my archaeology days here. It was always an exciting kind of a place to come, this. I want to try and get a whole site shot, which is going to be fun. There's a lot of people around today. We'll see what we can do. There's also a lot of nonsense being spoken about archaeology and history, but you know, c'est la vie. I've not mentioned to anyone that I'm an archaeologist. Anyway, what I want to try and do is get a picture showing everything going down there, because I think there's quite a nice composition to be had, possibly catching this stone in front of me here as a bit of foreground interest. So let's have a play with this composition. Let me try and talk you through it. Looking out this way, I think we've got a pretty decent view there. I'll take that one first. I think I might just try repositioning that slightly around to get that tree there. That's nice. So there we go, we're getting a bit of reflection in that puddle too, which is quite cool. Quite like that. Now here's another one I've done. I've edited this as I normally would, and I'm just not really happy with it. It's not speaking to me, and I think a large part of the problem is the colours are just too muted. There's too much green, too mossy, too damp looking. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly just zoom in and take a couple of people out who are distracting from the photograph. And then I think what we're going to do is we're going to try and pop it into a monochrome finish and see if that just turns it around a wee bit for us. So there's that person there. I'm not that you're probably going to notice them in the final version anyway. There's a chap here who was speaking rubbish about history. And there's a couple there who are being a bit smoochy. Fortunately, it's just mostly texture, really. You don't really notice when someone gets deleted from a position like that. Right, so I've got rid of the distracting people. So now we're going to use a different package rather than colour effects. We're going to use silver effects, which gives me a kind of a control much more similar to a vintage darkroom. I must admit I do like some of the presets that they have created, that DxO have created in this software, and I do quite often use those as a basis and then tweak from there. But there's so much variation. It is quite a good way of just speeding up the process. So contrast is always quite nice. Subtle glow, maybe a bit too much. I do quite often like sort of dark selenium and stuff like that. The current favourite is either going for something like contrasty or intensify as a starting point. I think contrasty might win. So that gives me a starting point for this photograph. So global adjustments do just that. They adjust the overall feel of the image. Contrast adjustments, again, that works. That works on that. So I can amplify, take out. I quite like a bit more black in my monos. I used to love Ilford Chrome and the Ilford films, and I would then develop, and they had these filters you'd put into the projector. And there was a dark purple one. What was it called? The multigrade, that was it. Ilford multigrade paper. With a deep purple filter into it. And you just got this intense contrast. It was brilliant. Helped that I'm also quite a big fan of the band Deep Purple. But I digress. So structure, that's kind of it kind of brings out different elements. So I do quite like a bit of structure into it, just because it gives it a bit more of something, a bit more ba-ba-boom. So overall, I'm quite pleased with that. That's looking a little bit more enticing now. So you can tone, you can go for various options to colorize it as you would in a darkroom. I like coffee. I do like a light coloured coffee tone on it. It just warms up the whole image. That's always a good option. I like to add some vignette, which is no surprise to anyone. I quite like the black framing, because it just again adds the edges to to do that, or you can burn the edges. A good soft burnt edges is always another option. So I think we'll go for burnt edges on this one. I quite like that vibe it gives. You can add borders if you so desire. Some people like to. Yeah, actually the borders can add something to it. They can. Not always. Sometimes they're a bit much. But if I'm going to add a border, I tend to add a simple border. I like the sort of handheld feel, the handmade feel of it, almost. Some look like you just torn the picture out in the dark room, and some look like edging strips. I do quite like that one, the thick black line around it, and the thinner one. I want to go with that, just for fun. Right, we'll apply that. I think what I might do is I might crop that white off and just leave the black border around the outside, or maybe just turn that border black. Let's just do that. So we can go to I can't remember where the fill tool is. If you can't find anything, just click on the search, type in what you're looking for, paint bucket fill, there we go. Black, job done. Oh no, that went wrong there. It's left a weird white border in, unfortunately, which is a bit annoying. But we can go back to our magic eraser. And hopefully that'll work out what I'm trying to do and just disappear it for me. Yeah, that's going to work perfectly. So if I ever get a picture I'm not happy with the colour of it, the way the colours work in it, then I'm quite a fan of just seeing if maybe a monochrome conversion is going to make it better, make it more interesting. Yeah, so monochrome, it's sometimes I shoot with the idea of it actually being monochrome at the point of inception. Other times it's because I'm just not happy with the colour cast, the colour balance, the way the light's working. And monochrome, because it takes the colour element out, it lets me just concentrate on the basics, on making sure that the composition is working, it's hanging together right. And it can look really, really classy as well. So it's not something to be afraid of, and it's always worth a little experiment. Even some that work well in colour can be quite nice as a mono as well. So it alters the feel of your final picture quite dramatically. So I've kept the integrity of the picture and the honesty of it, because I'm a great believer in that. I mean, the stuff I remove is usually very minor. I don't mind removing people, don't mind moving vehicles. I tend to leave most power lines in and things like that. I tend to leave buildings in. Just rubbish stuff that's blown in or walked in I don't want there is what I tend to remove. Random animals or random birds, I usually leave them in. Actually, I do like a bit of randomness. Right, there we go. That one can get saved. Flatten. Is there you know, that pano might actually be worth doing as well. So it's easier to do it now while I'm here than I wish I'd done it later. So there we go. So I think we've got some pretty cool stuff from here. What else can we tell you about the Cairns? So the site was originally used for about 200 years, from 2000 BC through to 1800 BC, I guess that'll be. And then it was reused again later on. It came back into occupation, dead people, came back into use around 1000 BC. So that's later into the Bronze Age. There are apparently some cup and ring slabs. What is that? A stone slab decorated rock art inside the chamber of the southwest. Yeah. Right, there is a cup and ring stone. Let's go and see if we can find it. So this is the southwest cairn, and within it there should be a cup and ring stone. I think it might be one of these ones on the outside face. There we go. Marvellous. So here we have it. There's a cup and ring marked stone here that was placed into the entranceway. Now, if memory serves me correctly, cup and ring marked stones were not really a big thing for the Bronze Age people. It's much older. I think that must be Neolithic. So it's been reused because it's cool. I'm going to try and get a picture of that looking out the window. Out the door even. So one of the things with this lens is it's entirely manual focus. So what I've done is I've set up my AF on button on the camera to give me a close-up, which lets me then focus it particularly accurately. More so than I could have done on a traditional DSLR, to be entirely fair. What I'll do is I'll darken this down a bit because I want to keep the detail in the sky. And this camera lets me pull shadows like there's no tomorrow. So that's pretty cool. I like that. Let's try one a little bit further back because I want to get the top of those trees in just to make it a little bit more. So there we go. That's got the treetops in. I'm trying to keep it as straight as I can because it's an ultra wide lens. It does cause all sorts of crazy distortion if you're not careful. Just darken that down a wee bit again because I like the sky detail. There we go. Perfect. So I think that'll do us. God knows what this is going to be like as a video. I was planning to do it with a gimbal, but such is life. I've forgotten to charge it, or I had charged it and I'd left it turned on, so the batteries had run out. What was the point? Right, all to do is put this away and head to the supermarket. So there we have it, a bit of a trip around where my two worlds collide. I was an archaeologist in the 90s, studied at Glasgow University, specialised in the Vikings and Picts, the interaction between them, but I did work in other areas too. And I love to get out to these sites and just have a look, and now I'm getting to share them with you and show how I photograph them too, because I don't think many people really take into account the human landscape so much, and it's very much a passion of mine to do that. It's kind of a specialist subject, if you like. So this is Clava, as I say, just outside Culloden on the edge of Inverness. It's nice and easy to get to, very accessible. It's one of the few locations I will tell you where it is because it's been overrun and made famous by Outlander and the pseudo-history contained therein. But it's a nice spot and it's very peaceful. If you get it on a nice quiet day, it is one of my very favourite places in the local area. Not that I've got here all that often. I was going to put the drone over, but we've got a few too many people around today. The weather's not ideal, so we'll call it a day there. I don't know if I'll get much done in the way of videos in the next week or two. The kids are all off school, so it depends if we get anywhere. If we do, they may feature my youngest as a comedy stand-in extra. We'll see how it goes. And now the supermarket. And when I get home, I'm going to charge that gimbal.